All right, so 2.3, complementary and supplementary angles. You've seen both of these before. We've looked at problems that are complementary and problems that are supplementary. We just haven't called them by those names. So it's more just a new vocabulary term. The overall concept is not super foreign to you guys after what we did last week. So here are the vocabulary terms. I'm going to shorten these up just because we're on a short schedule. So you need to just write the first sentence for each. So complementary angles, you need to know that they add to 90. Supplementary, you need to know that they add to 180. Adjacent angles, yep, you need all that. And then, yep. So that's about all we can cut out. We'll talk in detail about all of them more in just a second. But for now, I'll just give you a few minutes to write. All right, so complementary angles, it's two angles whose measure has a sum of 90 degrees. Sum means add, right? And 90 degrees makes a right angle. So if two angles go together to make a right angle, we call those complementary angles, okay? So a picture of complementary angles, if you wanted to add this in, it'd be two angles, when put together, make a right angle, okay? Supplementary is the same idea, but now you put two angles together to make 180. So that's a straight angle. So you already know right angles and straight angles. Now it's just two angles next to each other that form one of those angles. Adjacent angles are two angles that share a common vertex and one side, but no common interior points. So basically two angles that touch each other. These are adjacent angles. These up here are also an example of adjacent angles that I drew up top, okay? And then a theorem, we talk about these when we highlight our notes every morning. I always say highlight vocabulary terms and theorems in yellow. A theorem is just a true statement that follows from other true statements. So in geometry class, it's basically just a rule. If I tell you a theorem, it's a rule that you need to know. That's our exciting vocab for the day. Any questions? Anyone need more time?
No.
All right. You do not need to write all of this. I just want you to write one of these. Write what I'm putting in the box.
Is that not the example?
This is a theorem. It's the congruent complements theorem. The actual title of the theorem isn't super important, but the if-then statement is. And then I would just want you to write off to the side, true for 180 as well. So write what's in the box and the little side note star, and then we will talk about what this means. All right, so here are two theorems. Remember, a theorem is just a true statement. The first one's about complementary angles, so they add to 90. The second one's about supplementary angles, so they add to 180. Other than that, they're saying the same thing. Basically, if you can add two angles together and they equal 90, and you can add one of those angles to a different angle and it still equals 90, then the two angles must be equal to each other that were different. Okay? And it works for 180 as well. If two angles add to 180 and one of those angles adds to a third angle and also makes 180, the first angle and the third angle must be equal to each other. It sounds kind of crazy, but I'm just going to show you it with like real numbers. So, let's say we have angle 1. Someone give me a number between 0 and 90. 50. Okay, so let's say I have a 50-degree angle. And I add that to a random angle that I'm going to call angle 1. And that makes 90 degrees. Everybody still with me? So let's say I have that same 50-degree angle. And I add it to another angle, angle 3, and it still makes 90. Well, what's angle 1 have to be? 40. What's angle 3 have to be? 40. So they have to be the same. Okay, so angle 1 would have to be congruent to angle 3. Now, that doesn't just work for 50. If it was a 60 degree and a 60 degree, now what's angle 1 and angle 3? 30, but they're still equal to each other, right? So they're just saying if they both add with the same number to make 90, they've got to be the same. And it works for 180 too, right? If 60 degrees plus some angle equals 180, 60 degrees plus some other angle still equals 180, these two still have to both be like 120, right? That's all the theorem is saying. So it sounds kind of complicated, it looks kind of complicated, but if you actually sit down and work through it with real numbers, it's not crazy hard. Okay, so 3 possible answers here. Are the angles complementary? Are they supplementary? Are they neither? Students kind of get these flip-flopped, and I'll show you how I remember. Complementary comes first in the alphabet, right? C comes before S. So the one that comes first in the alphabet is the smaller one. That's the one where they add to 90. Supplementary comes after in the alphabet, right? S comes after C. That's the one that adds to 180. So we're going to add the 2 angles together. If they equal 90, we're going to call them complementary angles. If they equal 180, we're going to call them supplementary angles. If they don't add to either of those numbers, we're just going to say neither. So in part A, a 30-degree angle plus a 20-degree angle would give us what? 50. Is that anything special?
No.
It is not. Neither. All right, part B, when I add those, whoopsies, sorry. So 160 plus 20?
Supplementary is 180.
Yeah, they add to 180, which makes them supplementary angles.
Like for on the text on the worksheet, like can we show them the word?
Like comp and sup?
Yeah.
I mean, I won't feel great about it, but I won't mark you wrong. I'd rather you didn't, but... All right, part C, we got a 70 and a 20, which makes... 90, so we would call these what? Complementary. All right, any questions? So we are not running out of time, but I think we can pick up the pace a little bit here. So I just want you to write the answers with me, okay? So I'm going to number some angles, and then we are going to decide if the angles that are numbered are adjacent or not adjacent. Adjacent basically means right next door. They share one ray in common. They have the same vertex, they have the same ray in common. So on part A, they share a vertex, right? But do they have a side that's the same? They do not. So these would be an example of non-adjacent. So you can just write the answer with me. We're going to attempt to pick up our speed a little bit.
Keyword attempt.
Attempt, yes. Okay, part B. They share a vertex. Do they share a side? Yeah, that ray that I just highlighted in red, it is a side of angle 3 and of angle 4. I'm not looking at this guy right here. I'm just looking at the ones with the numbers in them. Okay? So these would be yes, adjacent. And then C, do they share a vertex?
No.
No, they don't share a vertex. They don't share a side. These would be non.
They're both right angles.
They are both right angles, but that was not what the directions asked me to talk about. Actually, they might not be right angles. They're not labeled with the little box. You can't assume anything, but they kind of look like it. I see what you're saying. No, you just, as I indicated 3 separate times, you don't need to draw these. Any questions?
Anna wrote the question.
All right, I'm going to move on. Okay, once again, you can just write the answers with me. So, angle F is a complement. Complements add to what? 90. So, these two angles, angle F and angle G, are complements. That means when I put them together, I make a 90. So, any ideas how we're going to find the missing one? If one of them's 23 and when I add them I make 90. Yeah, you could write an equation. The equation here would be like the measure of angle G plus 23 equals 90. Honestly, I think this is a little extra. It's a lot easier just to be like, oh, they need to add to make 90. So if I subtract the one I know, I'll get the one I don't know. Anyone know what 90 minus 23 is?
67.
67. Good. All right. The next example, example 4, they are supplements. So these are going to add to what?
180.
180. Same idea. You can write an equation if you want and solve for the missing angle, or you can just say, hey, they add to 180. I know one of them is 95. What's the other one? 85 degrees. Good. What are your questions on 3 and 4?
Nobody's done yet.
Nobody was done with that one?
No.
Okay. Are you just writing the answers?
Yeah. What? Wait. Never mind. I wrote the whole thing.
This is why picking up the pace is not as successful as I had hoped. That's okay. Your notes will be phenomenal.
Got that right.
Be colorful and pretty.
Put your pencils down. We got to get going. So just watch this. This is from that theorem that we wrote down. So if angle 1 and angle 3 are complementary, and angle 3 and angle 5 are complementary, which angles must be the same? So I am going to just kind of write this out. So if I have the measure of angle 1 and I add it to the measure of angle 3, I should get 90. That's the first sentence, right? Now, the next one says, well, if I take the measure of angle 3 and I add it to the measure of angle 5, that should also make a 90. Angle 3 and angle 3 are the same. Do you see that? So which ones would also need to be the same if they're going to add to be the same? 1 and 5 would have to be the same. So angle 1 is congruent to angle 5. Basically, everything's the same from one equation to the next besides the 1 and the 5, so I know the 1 and the 5 have to be equal. Equal and congruent are the same. Questions? All right, one more. Again, you don't need to write these down. Just practice with me. Actually, fine, write these down. Write the equation with me. So write what I'm about to write. Okay, these two angles come together to make a straight angle. A straight angle has how many degrees? 180. So if I take 2x and I add 50, I need that to equal 180. Write that part with me. How do I solve for the variable? Subtract 50 from both sides. So 2x equals 130. Then what? Divide by 2, divide by 2, and x equals 65. So again, when I put them right next to each other, they're adjacent angles, so they share a ray. When I combine them, I get a straight angle. Straight angle is 180. Put a plus sign in the middle. equal an 80. Boom, boom, done. In part B, do they add to 180? No, they make a right angle. How big's a right angle? 90. So this time when I write the equation, I'm going to put a plus sign in between the angles, and they're only going to equal 90. All right, like terms 1x and 2x is 3x equals 90. Yep, this is our last example. So today we learned good, and I'm going to shorten it. I'm actually going to use the angle symbol too. Complementary and supplementary angles. All right, here comes your homework.